In China's booming beauty industry, one tragic case revealed just how dangerous the pursuit of perfection could become. A young woman named Liu walked into a clinic hoping for transformation, but instead lost her life after undergoing 6 surgeries in just one day. Her story shocked the nation, sparked a courtroom battle, and exposed the hidden risks behind glossy advertisements and billion-dollar promises. What began as one woman's dream to look different turned into a wake-up call for an entire country. Stay with us as we uncover the lawsuit that shook China's beauty empire and subscribe for more powerful stories. It began with a decision that millions of young women across China have made in recent years: the pursuit of beauty through cosmetic surgery. In cities where billboards promise new faces, slimmer figures, and instant transformations, the pressure to look perfect is constant. For a woman named Liu, who came from a rural part of Guangxi province, the dream of changing her appearance was strong enough to push her into debt. She borrowed over 40,000 yuan, the equivalent of more than $5,000, believing that this investment in her body would pay off with renewed confidence and a better future. What followed was a chain of events that would expose not only the personal risks of extreme surgery, but also the fragile state of China's booming cosmetic surgery industry. The clinic Liu chose was in Nanning, the provincial capital. Like many beauty hospitals in China, it was brightly lit and marketed itself as a gateway to a more glamorous life. Social media platforms had fueled the culture of transformation, with endless streams of before and after photos that blurred the line between reality and advertising. Clinics competed to offer package deals, encouraging clients to combine multiple procedures at once to maximize results. For Liu, the package meant 6 surgeries in just 24 hours. The promise was intoxicating: double eyelids, a higher nose, slimmer thighs, and enhanced breasts and cheeks. It was the full-body makeover that influencers flaunted online. But beneath the polished ads and smiling testimonials, little was said about the dangers. On December 9th, 2020, Liu entered the operating room for the first set of procedures. Surgeons cut and stitched for hours, reshaping her eyelids and refining her nose. The process lasted about 5 hours, a grueling session that left her body under anesthesia for a significant stretch of time. The following day, without allowing her body much recovery, she went under the knife again. This time, the doctors targeted her thighs, sucking out fat in a long liposuction session. The removed fat was then injected into her face and breasts, another 5-hour ordeal. In 2 days, Liu's body had endured more than 10 hours of invasive operations. Her organs, blood flow, and breathing all bore the heavy burden of trauma. By the time she was discharged, Liu was exhausted but hopeful. The clinic staff sent her off with reassurances that everything had gone smoothly. She stepped into the elevator with her mother, likely thinking that the worst was behind her. Instead, the unthinkable happened. As the doors slid shut, Liu suddenly collapsed. Her mother panicked, screaming for help, as her daughter lost consciousness. Staff rushed to assist and called for an ambulance. But by the time she reached the hospital, it was too late. Liu died that same day. Doctors determined that the cause was acute respiratory failure triggered by a pulmonary embolism. Blood clots, a known risk of liposuction, had blocked her lungs. The rapid succession of surgeries, the strain of anesthesia, and the sheer scale of her procedures had overwhelmed her body. The news of her death spread quickly, sparking anger and disbelief online. Many people questioned why a clinic would allow so many surgeries in such a short time. Others asked how a young woman in her 20s, healthy and full of life, could be pushed past the breaking point in pursuit of beauty. Social media filled with heated debates about vanity, industry greed, and the dangerous culture of perfection. For Liu's grieving family, however, there was no abstract discussion. They wanted accountability. They had lost a daughter and a sister, and they believed the clinic had failed to protect her. Soon after her death, they filed a lawsuit against the facility, demanding compensation of more than 1 million yuan, the equivalent of about $168,000. Their argument was simple. The clinic had been reckless, combining too many risky procedures without proper care for her safety. The clinic resisted responsibility. Its representatives initially offered only 200,000 yuan, framing it as a gesture of goodwill rather than an admission of guilt. The family rejected the offer, unwilling to put a price on a life lost through negligence. The dispute escalated, drawing in local courts and media coverage. As the legal battle unfolded, shocking details about the surgery schedule came to light. Experts testified about the dangers of back-to-back operations and the higher likelihood of complications, such as blood clots. Liu's case was no longer just about one tragic death. It became a mirror reflecting the excesses of an industry that had grown too fast, chasing profits while cutting corners on safety. For the public, the case resonated because it fit into a larger story that had been quietly building for years. Cosmetic surgery in China had exploded into a multi-billion-dollar business, fueled by the desires of a younger generation, raised in the era of selfies and live streaming. Apps encouraged users to experiment with filters that made their noses sharper, their eyes larger, and their skin flawless. Once those images took hold, real-life surgery seemed like the natural next step. Clinics thrived, but regulation lagged behind. Unlicensed practitioners and misleading advertisements were common. Patients were promised perfection without being warned of the risks. Liu's death ripped away the glossy surface and showed the darker truth beneath. The courtroom became the stage where these issues were finally aired. Lawyers for Liu's family argued that the clinic's aggressive sales tactics and unsafe medical practices had directly led to her death. The clinic's defense tried to shift the blame, pointing to her physical condition and suggesting that complications could not be fully predicted. Judges were left to balance medical testimony, legal standards, and the raw grief of a family demanding justice. Outside the courthouse, netizens followed every update, pushing the case into trending topics that drew tens of millions of views. It was no longer a private tragedy. It was a national reckoning with an industry that had been selling dreams but delivering nightmares. This first chapter of the case set the stage for what came next. A deeper examination of how China's beauty industry had grown unchecked, and how one young woman's death would force the country to confront uncomfortable truths about vanity, profit, and regulation. The legal battle that followed Liu's death turned into something far larger than one family's search for justice. When the case entered the courtroom in Nanning, it forced judges, lawyers, medical experts, and the public to confront questions that had been ignored for too long. Could a clinic really encourage 6 operations in such a short period of time without bearing responsibility for the risks? Should profit-driven beauty hospitals be allowed to push patients beyond safe limits? And how could consumers protect themselves in a marketplace flooded with glossy advertising but little transparency? As her family pressed their claims, the court became a stage where the hidden flaws of the cosmetic surgery industry were laid bare. At first, the clinic attempted to minimize its role. Its representatives argued that complications can occur in any surgery and that Liu herself had chosen to undergo the procedures. They offered a settlement far smaller than what the family requested, framing it as an act of compassion rather than liability. This only deepened public outrage. Commentators pointed out that a young woman with no serious health issues had walked into the clinic alive and had not walked out. Families trust medical professionals to safeguard their well-being, not to push them into high-risk scenarios that maximize revenue. The suggestion that Liu bore responsibility struck many as an insult to her memory. The court hearings drew attention to the way cosmetic clinics operated in China. Many had adopted aggressive marketing strategies, using social media influencers and fake reviews to convince customers that life-changing beauty was only a procedure away. Package deals encourage clients to bundle multiple surgeries together for a discount, with little regard for the physical toll. In Liu's case, experts testified that undergoing so many invasive procedures in such a short window greatly increased her risk of pulmonary embolism. The lack of adequate recovery time between surgeries left her body vulnerable. For medical professionals, this was a clear violation of the principle of patient safety. Yet clinics across the country were following similar practices, betting that customers would focus on the promised transformation rather than the potential dangers. The public followed each detail with fascination and alarm. Chinese social media platforms amplified the story, with hashtags about Liu's case, drawing tens of millions of views. People debated the value of beauty in a society that prizes appearance so heavily. Many women admitted they had considered similar surgeries, but Liu's death made them question the risks. Parents voiced fears that their daughters could fall into the same trap of loans and false promises. Even some who supported the cosmetic surgery industry acknowledged that regulation had failed to keep pace with its growth. The booming business, valued in the billions, had been allowed to expand in a legal gray zone where unqualified practitioners could thrive and consumer protection was weak. The case also highlighted the emotional and financial burdens on patients. Liu had taken out a significant loan to pay for her surgeries, a debt she never lived to repay. This reflected a broader trend of young consumers borrowing money for cosmetic enhancements, convinced that beauty could bring better opportunities in work, relationships, and social standing. For Liu's family, the debt became a cruel reminder of the cost of her pursuit of perfection. They were not only grieving her loss, but also facing the financial weight of a system that encouraged her decision. The lawsuit, in their eyes, was about more than money. It was about exposing the negligence of a clinic that had failed in its duty of care. As the trial progressed, judges had to weigh expert testimony against the defense's attempts to downplay responsibility. Medical professionals explained in detail how pulmonary embolisms are often triggered by extended operations, immobility, and trauma to the body, conditions that perfectly described Liu's experience. They argued that the clinic should have known better and limited the scope of procedures. The defense countered that no doctor could guarantee safety and that Liu had willingly signed consent forms. The debate revealed another troubling aspect. Many patients did not fully understand the documents they signed, often rushed through paperwork without clear explanations of risks. This practice, widespread in the industry, left consumers vulnerable. The first ruling was a powerful statement. The court found the clinic fully responsible and ordered it to pay over 1 million yuan in compensation, close to what the family had demanded. For a moment, it seemed like a victory not just for Liu's relatives, but for all patients who had been wronged by careless clinics. The decision sent shockwaves through the industry, signaling that courts would no longer tolerate reckless behavior. However, the battle was not over. The clinic appealed, arguing that the amount was excessive and that Liu's own health condition contributed to her death. On appeal, the higher court adjusted the ruling, reducing the compensation to around 590,000 yuan, and acknowledging that her physical state played a partial role. While the family still received significant damages, the change reignited public debate about accountability and fairness. The case exposed deep flaws in how China regulated cosmetic surgery. Industry insiders admitted that many clinics operated with minimal oversight, some using doctors without proper certification. Advertising often exaggerated results while downplaying risks. Authorities had issued fines in the past for false promotions, but the penalties were small compared to the profits being made. Liu's death became a turning point, urging regulators to step up enforcement and rethink consumer protection. Discussions began about stricter licensing, heavier penalties for violations, and more transparency in advertising. Advocacy groups pushed for reforms that would force clinics to disclose risks clearly and ban dangerous package deals. The government faced mounting pressure to respond, as citizens demanded changes to prevent another tragedy. For everyday people, the case left a lingering unease. If a young woman like Liu could be persuaded into such extreme surgery and pay with her life, how many others were at risk? Her story became a cautionary tale repeated in news programs, talk shows, and online forums. Some argued it was a personal tragedy amplified by media, while others insisted it was a symptom of a much larger problem. Either way, Liu's name became synonymous with the darker side of the beauty industry. She had hoped for transformation, but instead she became a symbol of the hidden costs behind flawless appearances. By the time the dust settled from the appeals process, the case had already achieved something rare. It had forced open a conversation that cosmetic clinics preferred to avoid. Patients began asking tougher questions before agreeing to procedures. Families urged their loved ones to think carefully about risks. Even within the industry, some professionals admitted they needed to slow down and prioritize health over sales. Liu's death was irreversible, but the outrage it sparked carried the possibility of change. What had started as one woman's personal decision to alter her appearance now stood as a lesson for an entire nation reckoning with the price of beauty. What lingered after the courtroom battles was not just the grief of one family, but a national reckoning with how deeply the pursuit of beauty had embedded itself into Chinese society. Liu's story was a tragedy, but it was also a mirror that reflected the pressures weighing on an entire generation. Social media platforms glorified transformation, showing endless reels of influencers whose surgically altered faces became aspirational goals for millions. The beauty industry sold the idea that appearance was destiny, that a sharper jawline or bigger eyes could unlock jobs, relationships, and social capital. In this culture, clinics thrived not because they promised safety, but because they promised dreams. Liu's death punctured that dream with a cruel reality check. Her case also exposed how cosmetic surgery had quietly become one of the most litigious areas of medicine in China. Court data revealed that disputes over botched procedures and misleading advertisements were on the rise, with judges struggling to balance consumer protection against an industry generating billions in revenue. Liu's lawsuit was unusual only in its visibility. Countless others had quietly ended in settlements or faded into silence, leaving victims scarred both physically and emotionally. The widespread attention forced courts to consider stronger deterrents, such as higher compensation for victims misled by false claims and stricter penalties for unlicensed practitioners. Regulators began talking more openly about closing loopholes that allowed shady operators to flourish. For once, the industry could not hide behind glossy ads and celebrity endorsements. The ripple effects of Liu's case also reached into the everyday decisions of young women and men across the country. Parents began urging caution, warning daughters not to borrow money or chase extreme makeovers. Online forums that once celebrated surgery packages started to feature cautionary posts about risks, recovery, and regrets. Even those who still chose to undergo procedures did so with a sharper awareness of the potential dangers. Clinics, sensing the shift in public mood, adjusted their marketing at least superficially. Some emphasized safety protocols, others highlighted their licensing, and a few even boasted about refusing unsafe combinations of surgeries. The industry had not reformed overnight, but Liu's story made recklessness harder to defend. At a deeper level, the tragedy raised uncomfortable questions about values. Why had beauty become so closely tied to self-worth in modern China? Why were young people willing to endure pain and debt for the promise of perfection? Liu's story did not provide answers, but it forced people to look at the costs of a culture obsessed with appearances. She had dreamed of a new life, but her pursuit ended in death. The clinic lost a lawsuit, but it was society that faced the harsher verdict. The recognition that unchecked industries can turn human insecurities into profits at the expense of lives. In the end, Liu's name became a warning etched into the collective memory of a nation. She will be remembered not for the surgeries she never lived to enjoy, but for the truth her case exposed. Beauty, when treated as a commodity without limits, can kill. Her death pulled back the curtain on an industry that had been thriving in shadows, forcing China to see that the price of perfection is often far higher than advertised. Liu's death was more than a personal tragedy. it became a symbol of the fragile line between aspiration and exploitation. Her lawsuit forced China to confront the reckless practices of an industry that profited from insecurity while downplaying life-threatening risks. Though her family won partial justice, the greater impact was a nationwide conversation about safety, regulation, and the true price of beauty. Her story continues to echo as a warning to anyone tempted by the promise of instant transformation. For more untold scandals and powerful revelations from behind the spotlight, make sure you subscribe and never miss what comes next.